Welcome to PR Talk, sponsored by the PRSA of Oregon. This is your host, Amy Rosenberg, founder of Veracity and author of A Modern Guide to Public Relations. Help other people find our podcast by subscribing, rating, giving us a review, or sharing on social media. Thanks for tuning in.
Hi, Amy.
Hi, Mike.
Hi, listeners. Welcome to the PR Talk podcast. Today, I am going to be your host, and my interviewee is Amy Rosenberg.
We're going to flip it on you.
That's right. Yeah, I get to be the pseudo host, as I am every once in a while. But the reason that I get to host today is we're going to talk to Amy about this book that she recently published. Congratulations.
Finally. No, just kidding. Sorry.
No.
That's really bad. Very rude to myself.
So yes. The book is titled A Modern Guide to Public Relations. It is available on Amazon. You can search for that, or of course on our landing page, which is at prtalk.co. That's prtalk.co. You can find the info there. But I just wanted to ask you a few questions about it. There's some kind of themes in there that I wanted to pick up on. And so I'll just kind of dive right in unless there's anything you wanted to say.
Oh, no, go ahead.
All right. So one of the things that I see in there is you talk about maximizing everything. And of course, working with you, I kind of know what this is, but can you give a little insight into what you mean by, being a PR maximizer?
Well, first of all, shout out to Monique Barton, who was my boss over at Guard Communications before I started my firm. And she recently, I want to say retired, but if you follow her on Instagram or whatever, you would be like, what? Because she's, amazing looking. She recently retired from head of donation fundraising or something big for Bank of America. So Monique started that whole thing, but it's just a way of being. I mean, we could call it whatever we want to call it. I mean, I think there are certain people who are maximizers and certain people who are not. And Monique just kind of instilled this into our department at the ad firm. We were in the little PR department. And it was just like, if you're going to do some PR, let's maximize it. Or actually, if you're going to do anything, let's maximize it. Yeah.
Well, and I think that, we hear that every day, right? It's a great mindset to have, but what's interesting about it too is, maximizing everything. And then another theme or another piece that pulled out from there is perfection as the enemy. So you're maximizing, yet you're not maximizing to get to perfection, right? That's not what we're talking about.
Good point. Yeah. So first of all, maximizing is just doing all the things, right? So it's even harder now to maximize because now we have social media and we have all these different channels. And so really good example is you're going to write some social copy, but you're going to customize it for all areas or all platforms. And then a classic PR example is just customizing your press release per either area or per audience. And then just kind of going above and beyond and thinking about the little details, even how you label and title your photo, right? I mean, there might be a system around that, and you might even label it in a way that would help the press. So it's kind of insane. It's kind of like a hard person to be a maximizer because it's not like I try to maximize everything. I just inherently do. And it can be a little overwhelming, and I'm sure it's overwhelming to work with me. And I kind of think maybe it's overwhelming for our clients as well, but we know when to back off when we need to back off, but, we're just like idea machines and we bring those ideas to the client, and sometimes you can do it, sometimes you can't, and that's fine. Yeah. But in terms of perfectionism, oh God. Okay. So do you want me to get into that? Or
so one of the things I wanted to ask you about maximizing, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but how do you know when to stop? How do you know when to stop maximizing? You mentioned with clients, you just sort of get a feel for it. But, do you have specific things in place that let you know, okay, here's the process we're going through, and once A is B, we're done, or we know if A is C, we move on to D?
Okay, so good question. Well, if you're in-house, it's all about the plan. So the PR plan or the contract if you're not in-house. But this is where you need to do really detailed plans because you can kind of get out of control. And I guess you just need to know your place in a way. I know that sounds weird, but stay in your lane. So if you're working with a big, internal team and you already have an amazing social team, just chill out and just do your thing, right? But then as a firm, it's really about getting a good plan going that can help. Just like first, how we work at Veracity is just sitting down with the potential client to figure out exactly what they need. And then we write it down and we say, we're going to do X, Y, and Z. And it's essentially in the contract. But then the plan is a bigger, broader plan is fleshed out based on that. We just stick to our plan, really. I mean, that's really the only way you can do it. And you do record time, if you're at an agency, and just make sure you're not going crazy. So you really just stick with that. But I guess there's just other ways you can kind of maximize and possibly annoy a client, which is, I think, a lot of people just feel bad when they can't do ideas, right? So because of course everyone wants to do all the ideas, even if it's like, hey, I just got this coverage, so here's what you could do with it, X, Y, and Z, whatever it is. At the bare minimum, put it on social media. But at the maximum, maybe it could be used for like a donor piece or whatever, a potential fundraising piece to go to donors. But, again, people can only do so much. And so as you work with a client for so long, you start to see what they can and can't do based on their capabilities, of the team. And then, and just what are the immediate needs, right? So maybe it isn't fundraising during COVID. It's something else.
Right. Yeah, that totally makes sense. I mean, I think what I'm hearing is you maximize as much as you kind of can and what makes sense. But sometimes, and maybe this kind of goes into that perfection is the enemy. Sometimes you also have to know when to quit, right? When you're sort of you're not getting the returns back that you could be spending that time, energy, effort, money, whatever on something else. You spread yourself too thin or whatnot.
Yeah. So the perfection thing is a little different. It's more about like going over your details a million times, like rereading a press release a million times before you send it to somebody, or just it's a little bit it's a little anxiety, not provoking. It could be caused by anxiety, which that's a whole different thing that I realized. But, growing up and just even growing up as a young person in the industry, you hear about perfectionism as a positive thing. And now I realize, just reading self-development books and just more training in the world, that perfectionism is actually like super negative. But I would literally go and say things to my clients like, well, I'm a perfectionist. Like, oh my God, you sound like such an idiot. I mean, I had a client who's still a client, but the company is a client, but he's since retired, a very worldly person, right? Like he owns, a big company in Oregon. But, he happened to have worked in a commune before. So he probably is worldly and like knows that perfectionism is not good, that there's some spiritual element to our work-life balance. And so going around saying, well, I'm a perfectionist, this is pretty dumb. So, it's negative because if you're a perfectionist, you can't get as much done. And then the main thing to remember is that nothing's ever perfect. Because it can always get better. That's positive. It's not like negative that nothing's ever perfect. Just remember that things can always get better. And so it's impossible to reach perfection.
Yeah. Well, I also think sometimes perfection or perfectionism, it can be used as a crutch too, right? Like especially if you're doing like the thing that is you're good at or that, you like to do, you just keep doing that until it's perfect, because then you don't move on to the next thing necessarily. Right. And so it also, let's say you're working that press release or that pitch. Well, the next step is sending it out. Right. Well, if maybe you're not as comfortable with that part of your job, it's easy to kind of get stuck. Like we always talk about getting stuck in the weeds. It's like, no, eventually you gotta move on and do the next step, which it kind of wraps back into what you were talking about before with the plan. There's different steps and different stages for a reason in things.
Yeah. And just quickly, I'd say perfectionism is a wonderful crutch for procrastination. And then procrastination is fear.
Right.
It's like fear-based. And so if you're worried about calling the press, then you would love to be stuck in the weeds of writing. So you just have to just move on.
Great. Well, speaking of moving on, one of the other themes that we picked up on in the book is you talk about, I think a few different times, and I've heard you talk about this with our folks, whether it's clients or employees, the PR mindset. You talk about specifically the PR mindset in PR, but I'm also curious about how, I think that terminology and your idea of the PR mindset is something that can set you up whether you're in PR or not. So what do you mean by the PR mindset, and, how can that set you up in any career?
Yeah. Well, if you look at if you really dig in and look at people's background, a lot of them that are in high positions now, they did start in PR. So it makes you wonder, like, what was that fundamental training and what did it give them to succeed in other disciplines? And so, frankly, the PR mindset might be a little bit redundant with maximizing. I mean, I think at the core, PR people are optimists and maximizers, just like a maximizer would be an optimist. Thinking, we can get all this done, and then not realizing how many hours are in the day. That's quite optimistic, right?
Right, yeah.
So it's that, but then the PR mindset, it's just key PR ways of doing things. So it's being organized, which I kind of roll my eyes at sometimes because it's hard for a creative to be organized. But at the end of the day, we really are organized people. That we have to be. Otherwise, either we won't be good at what we do, or it will not be as effective. So organizing means not only, with your campaigns, but also with either your client or your boss, and kind of helping them help you. So reminding them, to do something or getting in front of them frequently, that's kind of a PR mindset thing. Like, I remember somebody saying like, hey, did you do this, Amy? Or did you find out about this, Amy? And I said, well, they didn't write me back. Like that was enough. And then my boss said, well, call them.
Right.
It's like, duh. But so it's just like, it's a little bit of that tenacity to just get your fucking answer. Sorry, I'm not supposed to swear, but just get stuff done, And then the other kind of main two more things about that. One is to take all of your work with you wherever you go. I know that sounds really weird and not work-life balancey, but that's a whole nother topic. There is no work-life balance. There's work-life flow or meld. But anyway, so as you're doing laundry, you're thinking about this, that, or the other, or as you're driving, you come up with a solution to a problem you might have. To me, that's kind of PR-y because it's a little creative as well. Like I get a lot of good ideas right out of the shower. Mm-hmm. So there's that. And then the other thing is if you're really, truly in PR, you're following the news. And so if you do all of those things, especially if you follow the news and you take your work with you, then you begin to operate from gut instinct. And to me, that is truly the PR mindset, is operating from gut. And so after you do that for a while, the work becomes faster and more seamless, and you don't have as many, headaches and worries.
I kind of want to follow up on the the work-life flow or meld topic, but I also kind of feel like that would maybe that should be its own podcast.
Well, whatever. We can figure it out. I can talk about it anytime.
Well, let's save that, diving into that topic for another time. So we'll do a little tease on that one. One of the things that I really liked, so I've read your book in various pieces, of course, as, sort of one of your, like you like to call brain off editors, gone through it a few different times during the process. And I've pulled out a few of what I thought were like favorite quotes or favorite lines. And so I'm going to tell you one of those, and I want you to give me a little bit more background into what you mean by it.
Oh, wait. So this is a surprise, guys. We did not prep for this at all. So, okay. What is it?
Okay. So I'm going to start with one that I think is kind of fun. So it's, quote, "Your phone ringing off the hook with calls from PR people, college educated telemarketers in disguise, a couple hundred times a day." First, do you know where that is in the book?
Yeah.
Tell me about it.
Well, first of all, so we're pretending, the quote starts with "your phone is ringing off the hook." So the "your" is press. So you're pretending. So basically in the book, I'm just trying to kind of establish the reason why the press might not call you back, and kind of to build a little bit of empathy around what their job is so that you can understand what it's like. And so if you are the press, your phone is ringing off the hook from PR people who are essentially college educated telemarketers in disguise. That is pretty rude for me to say that PR people are like that we are essentially telemarketers. But we are, like, unless you kind of do it the right way, which is what I'm talking about with I can never say maximization. So like kind of going above and beyond. So like customizing and reading the press or whatever, reading, watching, whatever, before you pitch. That's total maximizing, because that takes a lot of time. And so doing all of that, then you wouldn't be a telemarketer. You would be like a true PR person. And then the whole college degree thing, it's just because you can get a college degree and just put PR behind your name and get 1 year of experience. But let's say where you're working didn't give you any training, and they just kind of say, well, you're just going to send this out and call people.
Follow up.
Like, training, that's got to be like a telemarketer. Sorry, go ahead.
No. So you just call them, you send this and follow up.
Yeah. Like you need to have a little bit of training on just everything needs to be more thoughtful. Otherwise, you essentially are a telemarketer.
Yeah. Okay. So last question for this episode of the PR Talk podcast. So one of the things, and you've touched on this just in the last question and the last answer you talked about. So one of the themes that kind of goes, and I believe it's, you kind of end with this a little bit, is you write about living the PR lifestyle. What do you mean by that? What's the PR lifestyle?
So it's all of that kind of taking our work with us in the shower, taking it on the road. And really what it is, and just living, breathing, not that you have to think about your work or think about PR or think about the news all the time, but it just becomes a gut instinct. And so there's that. But then the lifestyle piece is just how you think and how you operate. And so there is a little piece of ethics, not a little, a lot of piece of ethics there. There's teamwork, like working with others, and even what you might consider a competitor is never your competitor. We're all a team, whether you're in, PR or anywhere. And then, continuing to maintain your connections, because you don't know when those will help you later with a different campaign or a different client. And then just kind of, writing and reading. It's part of our deal. Like if you, we write a lot. Okay. Everyone knows that, but you can't write if you don't read. So you're going to read every day if you're really living the PR lifestyle. And I'm not talking about like, scrolling down Twitter. I'm talking about picking up a book, whether it's digital or in your hands.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Okay, I'm done with the questions, but I'm actually gonna leave us with one of the other quotes I really like from the book, and I think it's a good ending for this episode. So it goes like this: quote, "If doing all the work without any of the glory leaves you feeling like a slighted Cinderella stepsister, welcome to PR." Thanks, Amy.
We'll end there. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the PR Talk podcast. Find Amy's book, A Modern Guide to Public Relations, plus more PR Talk episodes at prtalk.co. And remember to subscribe, rate, and review.